Hello, Americans. Many of us have had black pupils' whites of eyes and have known whenever someone used black or white that they're leaving out and valuing having been left out. What we also know had been sustained since semi-ancient times, since before modern religious messengers, and then before Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. Already, the names of the human species body, of individual bodies, have been taken to systems tactile ulterior from the one that shows us its hyper difference, generating all other differences. It shows us that there are completely different species bodies. There are fish, birds that are individual species bodies with a whole bunch of individuals of that species body, until they go extinct. And the group differences. And extinction is not weakness. Only humanity has been self-valued, used remotely too, while pretending otherwise being sensed, including if as a majority of people, including if as everybody of a country. Any grouping of countries that entertains locations, areas, and states. Convictions by individuals and by principles. This is principle by nature projecting this to us. Now, not only do we have two eyes, other species bodies have two eyes. They have quality, aspect, nature distinct, but non-distinct, and simultaneous, but also per that neither us nor them, but all things anyway. So I'll say that. Species bodies of individual bodies, all group differences generated. This is most probable too. And this is inseparable from the subjects, like what generated everything. A subject is one of the parts of speech of English grammar. All the parts of English grammar and of other ancient languages before the sciences became criminally formidable and tactically abridged, they work with the same system. Not just as the republic for which we stand, its campus is Marsyas and pantheism. Not about many gods. Not about its own ism, but about principle, about this principle. That one which shows us it is not us, it is not the other species bodies. That has all the species bodies this way. People say, oh God, and leave a nature of debate. Things that aren't even debatable. With this, it shows us, nature shows that we pay attention. It's functional, how it is a distinct identity of hyper invisible, but still discernible. And where it is an individual body, it simultaneously has 5 parts of itself. There's 3 parts of itself grouped. For example, the present participle and the past participle. The ancients more probably would have thought as present participle / past participle. As present / forever nature, and as past / forever nature. In other words, there's the value of what you know of the past that is gone, but is only increasing value. And there are seasons that you don't even know if they're going to come yet. But you could already discern that they're only increasing value even if they never get here. Because with that, too, you could discern to an extent the identity. The same way it shows us it is a distinct identity of simultaneous nature. A distinct identity of value / variable regression. Again, not being us, not being the other species bodies, but being all things anyway. In many praise, it's coming to, from, as, with, and for. Not just all things, even if they're made up. It is coming distinctly, non-distinctly, simultaneously / hyper-simultaneously onto the finite parts of it, the order of the finite. The active parts of it, the order of the active, or grouped. And the progressive parts, but progressive per dictionary's definition of it, with nature leading. Nature being a word I'm using for the word identity itself. It is one identity of value progression that is hyper invisible but still discernible. Again, being not us, not those species, but all things anywhere, that has the species volumes manifest, is a scientific value as a scientific value. In other words, there are theories on how we think and on reason about what's practical. For example, Judge Napolitano is well-read man about many countries of the names, many part names of the human species body of individual body. When people speak about economies or about economics at countries A through Z, everyone has left out. It has self-valued. It has been used remotely self-valuing, leaving and having left out. How James Madison and the founders behind him and his plan, before he was even a president, they declassified how they all use his plan. And George Washington, no one allows honesty about the counter-extortion of George Washington, who demonstrably had no choice but to help James Madison, his plan. And the founders behind him, plural, that I read that we were directed to refer to them, plural, as him, singular. And we're also, nature itself shows us, and our founders showed us, to value president/chief. They didn't say slash, but they said, no, that's a distinct identity, part of the rest of its nature. This is one identity of value/value progression. Again, that is not us, not those people, but it's anyway, a distinct identity, because we are simultaneous with other species' bodies, distinctly but non-distinctly, and we are simultaneous, again, per that further slash hyper-simultaneous, as a trinity. As a trinity is inseparable from all parts of all things, and then further distinctly, but not while non-distinctly, from the grouped parts, and then further distinctly, but non-distinctly from the simultaneous parts. And this is how it is discernible per science, how we can observe. There is a distinct identity of hyper invisible, but still discernible, and it is functional. How it has too. How there is manifest too. There are manifest 5 parts of it, or no, 3 parts of it, 3 distinct identities of hyper invisible but still discernible. With the present participle and with the past participle. That's the invisible / hyper invisible. The present participle. The parts of speech are about the invisible but still discernible. In all parts, in the regarding James Monroe and the Monroe Doctrine. James Monroe came right after James Madison, and James Madison and our founders, they declassified, and nature itself shows us that and how America's founders did not have free speech. Had American history been taught properly and at founding locations, everyone would have understood that and why and how George Washington came to Wethersfield, Connecticut, and Hartford, Connecticut, right before the last battle over the Revolutionary War. Against England. We're supposed to have clearer than day understanding of how a whole bunch of countries were locked here and there as rules self-valued to an extent, even though not self-valued. In other words, as systems tax military, from where nature has our differences, as our difference as the human species difference. The human species body of individual bodies. Therefore, our names all group differences. No longer, we're now systems that are obfuscating and worse. Our means to discern that which can be to be led by that which is true always, not leaving the slightest detail out. Not one leader has representation at locations, areas, and states. That's one problem. The suburbs were designed tactically to nature. People pretend that's debatable. That's another problem. People pretend it's debatable that James Monroe was still factually nature, tortured, extorted, and enslaved, but also counter-extorted. James Madison's plan forced the Civil War. The North and the South had slavery entrenched, which is one of 6 crazy laws against everyone. There is a witch trials place next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens House in Wethersfield, Connecticut. For example, where George Washington had to come, even with the French general's help, they could only counter-extort and leave those crazy breaching method laws that were 3 ways manifest as torture, extortion, and factual nature slavery. And everyone had to pretend other to an extent. Otherwise, that body would have been sensed. It is sensed, and that's adapted to, including that body is a majority of people, including if it's everyone of an entire country together. Any grouping of countries that can't discern the breaching method, singular, has no problem with remote possession of their syntax, therefore their nature, their functioning, their difference. Black peoples, we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time. No one was supposed to shoot until we see the whites of eyes. President Trump is trying to say, we cannot keep speaking about the economies. He doesn't. At campus is A through Z. Sickly, distinctly, they replaced what James Madison communicated to us, even though it's declassified. Self-valued roles stayed using his words and our founders' words, pretending not to realize that there was a breaching method measuring everyone's words. An extent of collusion /S against themselves and against everybody else. Otherwise, that body was sensed. If anyone tries to deny that, their logic has inherent to it, active to it, and progressive to it. Demonstration /S of the same thing. This is all about even peaceful energy generation. We're supposed to understand that the suburbs are designed tactically to nature, to be a landscape theater, mowing the lawn. The soil is getting more and more. There's like barely any worms at all. Walking into puddles in the rain. All the bugs go away from the birds. The fish, they're no longer on the surface of the ponds. We're no longer fishing them. All kinds of life. Nature shows, in other words, it shows that even the fish. In the rain, worms start walking into the water where the bugs are no longer on the thing. In the rain, now there's less bugs for the birds. The worms start walking up coming up from the ground. I'll gather round. In other words, nature communicates with us, our body as its own. But our one little species has been criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence since some ancient time. Prepare your minds, because that's the way to speak about it. There was a predicate acts with facts delivery system method that had been sustained by Native Americans. And little kids hadn't have the capacity to understand and to appreciate this. Dishonestly, adults and kids pretend and say whatever at location /S because they've been changing and faking what's actually digitally recorded. The Wethersfield Police Facebook page has a Joshua Schumack involved with foreign and domestic intelligence families that were involved with recorded, confessed, demonstrate, confirmed with a Violet families with a whole bunch of people at and next to Harvard Hospital, with the houses and businesses next to it, involved with the intelligence communities, with their roles with different police forms, state police forms, and their roles with databases, illusion stacking, predicate acts with facts roles, with judges, prosecutors, personally and professionally, at the same time with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists. Predicate acts with facts roles, everyone's all of a sudden is using the words like extremism and radical, not just other than they've been used in the past. But tactically ulterior from the identity that the sciences share, shows us to appreciate that and everything. So in other words, before them and through the Monroe doctrine, they didn't have free speech because there was a crazy law. There were crazy laws entrenched. No one had the right to have slavery. It was still slavery entrenched in Northern Carolina. Oh, but some say we're voting for it, if they're going to be for it or not. The Constitution was read on a bridge. People have rights that are too numerous to have to list them. Judge Napolitano said this is one of the amendments. See, but people can't even appreciate Marbury versus Madison properly because you guys have replaced right from the communications of James Madison, for example, the scientific value of the human fact tribute nature preaching method. That nature itself shows us is one of the things true always, is what those laws were about. Those crazy laws that had been sustained before America's founders were born, and James Madison. And then they went and got George Washington counter-extorted to help them. And agreeing to help counter-extort everyone else because it was through a plan. That was long-term for us to get free speech. Let one person speak. All Whisper Creek. In other words, people have the names of the people of the sciences have been using the knowledge of good and evil to pretend things are debatable that are not. This is a principle about James Madison, his plan, and then they went to George Washington. And this is why and how they had to leave the slavery entrenched, but why and how they countered it even after their death. Still having to have us complete that. So people can't speak for revolution, honestly. How are they going to speak for wars? They can't. They have to pretend passions and emotions regarding the wars, regarding the serious things that are serious, so they could use that for excuses. Back here, where not one identity could speak for seriously, legitimately. They've been getting away with it because you guys were child abused at campuses A through Z. In other words, people can't defend the flag because you guys aren't defending. You guys aren't appreciating that breaching method having been sustained against Native Americans. And we know it was a differences racketeering method. It was to hurt, kill, and employ, and help long-term distinct identities, roles, needs, and nature syntactically manifest styles as systems tactical ulterior from the human species body of individual bodies, our group differences. Had one person been allowed free speech, but in other words, anyone really had free speech would have been surfaced by now. Many ways, fake branches need to bow, and there is seed, and fall, and there is seed. In many ways, the people. In other words, but when we do it that way, even when we're wrong, we're right. We keep it going. Positive value, nature, progression, action, not just with the economy. There's in jobs. They're putting more jobs and time, wasting time. Subjects are all connected. All these interfaces are going to change with the computer programs. With the computers too, they should be stackable, and the kids should be taught that. Okay, well, that was yesterday's technology. Well, we'll build with it. And when we have the class, it takes like that. It's like that. We'll watch a YouTube video. I mean, we take better, faster than that. You guys make things, the names of people, the sciences. When it comes down to it, people speak about predicate acts with facts. Connecticut's Channel 3 News attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with others about the World Trade Center attack, while they had roles forcing a principal child to bruiser, while they had collusion/S with what brought that up to me regarding roles with some murders and untimely deaths, plural, on off campuses, intercities, and timed use/S of that, also confessions. This breaching method used confessions before religious messengers were even born for the church to use it. In other words, the breaching method is using confessions because nature is also because nature is forcing that. In other words, but this is a breaching method that has even the grouped countries trying to counter where it caused kept also self-value roles with what it caused and kept. And so whether that causes and keeps, they're countering that because they need to keep that the original collusion with the original use of location/S everywhere there is the human species body has a body standing. We have been systems tactical terror from its own. Only the human species body has been self-valued while being and having been used remotely, criminally foreign influence. Tactically delusions raw. This breaching method needs to keep names blaming other things, others, ourselves, besides the human factor nature breaching method, for example. That's one of the things true always that was involved. What motivated rules with slavery? You guys use truths for lies. You guys self-value that being and haven't been done. What motivated rules for slavery? Our founders communicated because they didn't have free speech because everyone was factory nature tortured, extorted, and enslaved to an extent there was no counter to. So James Madison came up with a plan to unfold an ever-increasing method of damage control. Now, at America and at Russia and at Ukraine, from America to Russia, Ukraine, etc., all exceptions, the suburbs are manifest the way they are, and the cities are, because Russia was before us. But already our countries were here, there, shared, aside natures. Oh, well, we have to have negotiations in the room that's separate from the people. I learned in notes at Central Connecticut State University. No, distinct from what's written in the book, that they had internationally monitored conversations, and that they heard everyone around them, even for if they heard people speaking about building infrastructure outside of those internationally monitored conversations. And we know they had roles with the sustained differences between tribes A through Z and motivations, narratives regarding that. We know one of the motivations was the breaching method that came from some ancient times. Already the sciences' names were abridgments of what they had been to have revealed that a republic for which we stand, its campus system had been unabridged, had been led by that which is true always, not denying the smallest finite detail. In other words, not like sequence value. Names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, and the court's names, and the lawyers of both sides. Everyone's families, neighbors, all natures of conjunctions to them. The news at the same time, the difference of that or the different natures of communications locations. Same thing, natures of conjunctions to them. All that was is manifest per like a magic trick, very simple magic trick that is hyper powerful because it already had perfected self-valued roles with itself by doing bad things to names A through Z of the human species body of individual bodies, getting them to blame other things, others, ourselves, correctly needing to, but not knowing how to do it properly, and blaming those other people, others, ourselves wrongly as collusion/S with the breaching method that made everyone fight, to make everyone resolve it, to make criminal and citizens natures of peace, and to make criminal and citizens natures of war, to hide behind and through. And then it knew that nature would increasingly demonstrate that. And it's increasingly trying to hide from nature's demonstrations. But it's set up for itself a method to. Ugh. Many ways, this is more probably what things we learn through the nature of religions, like about a devil or Shaitan. While simultaneously, we know part of the things about religion have to do with where there are still collusions /s. Everywhere we're in a time, there are databases tied to ourselves. And then further, where the names of the people, the sciences are manifest. And people around, like classmates, class ages. These are subject treatments, styles, needs, and natures that have been used remotely, shown they cannot afford to have appreciated what is actually recorded value of people who have used our founders' words, leaving out all the ways we know that they did not have free speech, all the ways that we could discern when people get away with pretending other, how they get away with it. But we aren't allowed to speak with this, and how that's gotten away with too is how each age and nature of campus has people's self-valued roles with collusions that overt criminal enterprise is, private plural, private ones, and terrorists originally and still had at the same time with interbranch names on all sides of criminal and civil cases. The intelligence tied to them, foreign and domestic, they're neither one of them. At country's eighth regime, there's not one patriotism nature that is not, to an extent, some ways, critically, therefore completely used remotely, hyper criminally foreign influence, not just criminally foreign influence, fact, true nature, quality aspects of nature, like collusions pretending it's debatable. That if someone doesn't understand how James Madison's plan, how he was a founder before he was a president, and how he still and how and why he still didn't have free speech even as a president, they can't make a proper. They need to self-value. Collusion /s. They were all kinds of natures of organized crimes, methods of them manifest at and next to campuses of all ages and nature, including fire campuses and medical campuses, and their families, and the names of people next to them, and the difference of that is used at the same time. Where and how this breaching method uses and has used the sense and sensibilities of people, per the dictionary definition of it. First, before we could appreciate Jane Austen properly, we have to understand before America's founders were born, the breaching method that was entrenched. We have to understand, we have to use forgiveness not to assign guilt where it's going to be used to obfuscate the rest of the involvements, especially the worst one involved. There is a breaching method too. There are proofs that there may still be, and that there was a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise. In other words, we know that there was a breaching method that was sickly non-distinctly northern colonies and southern colonies, entrenched with things like slavery. And then America's founders were born. And witch trials, no. Even if that was made up. There's a witch trials place next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. Now there are layers of other hyper additional apparent motivations, natures, needs, interests, and sense and sensibilities, no. Right, where, and how. There were obligations and are increasing obligations to have understood clearer than day. Where and how that was only one phase in it. They were isolating the identity of England, here, where James Madison's plan had to force counter-extorted people, key people in key locations inside more than 13 colonies. But, before there was even a means to have a constitutional convention and have shared narratives about fake motivations, because everyone had to pretend fake motivation. They couldn't tell their real, complete motivations. Oh, we want to be free. They're dead. Unless they say freedom as some fake, the way they have it entertained still. If we had free speech, it would not have been left out how we have black people's rights of eyes. How little kids could discern. A breaching method was against the Native Americans. A breaching method was against the people of Europe. They're wasting time with subject treatments and the knowledge of good and evil about facts out of sequence as value that it is not. Facebook has all kinds of rules with the agencies, FBI, and Wethersfield Police Facebook page have rules since before Judge Napolitano left Fox News. Fox News, they have intelligence there. And the difference of the intelligence next to them, which is in Hartford, Connecticut, or people just going by. They have other natures of journalists and people involved also with their campuses and family members. It's recorded how they keep self-valued roles, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, and pretending other regarding the significance. If anyone tries to use how we have black people's rights of eyes, we have all these hyper-additional, hyper-evidential means to show people that have been using words like evidence and research have been using it criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions raw on a mass scale, while having been shown needs and means to self-value those natures of organized crimes, those natures of chaos, those natures of order, and the difference of it to counter such as collusion/S. There's that one identity of order that is not our species body. It's not those species bodies. Is all things anyway. But also has the rest of its complete identity demonstrated to us by how it comes. The more we can discern it, its individual body to an extent, different ways. It comes with the rest of the parts of its rest of its complete identity. Distinct identities of hyper-invisible but still discernible are these two, but it comes with a third. We're in how they are manifest, regardless if they are being used in a sentence or not, the present participle and the past participle. I'm referring to them as the participle natures. And I'm using the word nature as a hyper-additional word for identity. The same reason we need more than one name for a verb, as the present participle, as the past participle. These are words for these are phrases about. These are words for names rather for a verb. A predicate is a main verb. That with our hyper-additional names we need for the invisible but still discernible word or value verb, because English and other languages and all things come with that one identity of hyper-invisible but still discernible. Value/value progression. One identity of forever nature is making more and more of its body. And more it is valuing Earth's special difference here. While it is doing that, also positive onto itself, or our special difference is forced from here. We could be systems tactically ulterior from its own, while being used remotely too, self-valuing it while not valuing it, and the difference of that too. Using it for the breaching method, we're valuing syntactical style logic, nature of logic, questions and answers, tactical ulterior. from the system that makes us question the identity of relativity / hyperrelativity shown to us. So in other words, there are a lot of apparent and real motivation that a breaching method propagated, all to self-cultivated roles with it at A through Z. He had the knee boxings. In other words, so the experts on the law are certain type of victim / hyper victim, the best campuses or the worst campuses they came through. The difference of that is also exploited because they all failed. They all failed to have, and it's manifest in styles, natures of logic. Pretending, that's the most principal the key thing to understand. And James Madison is playing, of course, the Civil War. Who disbelieves that, tries to pretend other. Relative to that principle, it will have demonstrations of the same thing, inherent to, active to, progressive to their logic, their nature of logic. Black pupils. The sciences were obligated, demonstrated to by nature itself, for us at our country's A through Z, to understand how a breaching method employed criminal and citizen's natures of peace, at the same time wherein how it employed criminal and citizen's natures of war, hyper-criminally foreign influence, natures of war and peace, to stay collusion / S, to keep its identity of relativity to ourselves from being discerned. All identities of relativity have relativity positive and negative simultaneously / hyper simultaneously, and not just to value. And that's why values have relativity to positive and negative simultaneously, and to neutrality simultaneously. Same reason we do. Not just neutrality, equality, diffusion, appreciated here with that is a special difference, or it's forced from here. The breaching method monetized systems' other roles, only allowed people to defend themselves through these systems too. Whatever the motivations till he needs those motivations to hide behind it through. Because nature is showing us increasingly, in fact, human nature breaching method is one of the things that is true always, that the laws that were entrenched before America's founders were born, they were valued as a human fact, human nature breaching method, individually grouped and together. Multi-front. They were leveraged against our strengths and weaknesses at each age to keep the Trinity with that from being discerned, because nature itself has needs by those special differences here, or it forces them from here. But this is where and how we are quality as fact community where it counts, like online, where we can force that quality of fact human nature through the collusions that lawyers have, all kinds of wire and mail crime methods, all kinds of criminal and citizen exception nature, racketeering, worse than war crimes, roles, needs, nature, styles. For example, the names of the people of sciences, A through Z. Here ends the name. Even boxing, influenced by certain type of victim / hyper victim, where judges, prosecutors, their family members, and FBI, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, even with child abusers and people involved with the World Trade Center attack at the same time. People would just rather make things up fake and change things, value others doing and having done that, than respond without changing and faking and hiding what people say with short words. Connecticut Interbranch has been switching names, forging names, and planting fake things in their databases since I was a kid. They're refusing to get on paper. Weathersfield police attached me to fake conversations, even being at the police station as a kid. And then they pretended other through the news too. They in other words, they try to make fake exceptions too. Where I did get arrested when I was a sophomore. Increasingly, people involved with that class have women. Increasingly, people involved with the Britain Superior Court has roles with criminal enterprises, plural, and involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, with a whole bunch of countries and people, families that work with the campuses. The difference of their guilt, which the good people have kept made and kept evil. That's one of the things that is also evidences. Over the one they want to have a debate about things. As in other words, it's that country's A through Z, though. It's not just America. And that's what the president's trying to do, and that's what other individuals as leaders are trying to do. All exceptions I show too. The locations, areas, the states are forcing individual leaders to entertain what can't be entertained at locations, areas. All we do is admit that our country's A through Z, and we give ourselves injunctive reliefs. Every body of the human species body at once. Means come out of nowhere. People, in other words, the rules change. But instead of to hurt people or to adapt to it, which is only capable of being collusion/S with the adaptation, no, this preaching method that James Madison communicated about. We're supposed to have that understood, right? Where people are forcing people to call things racism so they can keep the classes and styles, needs, and natures, blame other things, others themselves, why the schools can't deal with principles properly. Not PRINCIPALS, PRINCIPELS. This principle having black pupils, whites of eyes. Is principle how people don't know a lot about American history, except for that, and how we know on a mass scale. We're not supposed to shoot until we see the whites of eyes. And there's more probably cipher than it is decipher for the ways, so many. At once, there are so many natures of organized crimes. And kids and adults pretending not to realize, while simultaneously being incapable of realizing, including as former directors of agencies at countries A through Z, their equivalents. We're in a semi-ancient trap. So in other words, we can't keep speaking about economics and everything like that and pretend not to realize there are exceptions. In other words, you guys are obligated by mandated law not to change, fake, and hide what I say. Self-value that being haven't been done. That's why there are whole digital crime methods that foreign and domestic identities were only capable of having at the same time. Increasingly roles with the news companies involved with the Saudi attackers and lawsuits regarding that. Civil lawsuits too. They're increasingly collusion/S with the World Trade Center attack. And people involved with Wethersfield police and wire crime acts and methods, falsified police reports, fake transcripts at the police station as identity theft, fraud, slanders, fake natures of ties between police. I never had a class with Eric Mendez or his brother. I only know them trying to plant fake exception of knowing me. No, I never had a word of conversation with the older Mendez police brother, who pretends I had a sentence to him, put me in quotes at the Wethersfield police station, which is also communicated confessions, extended in demonstrations involved with a Bob Chase, with Whiting Forensics, involved with a Phil Cololo, involved with some Mendez police, with some sexual and medical offenders, a principal being, involved with worse than upskirt pictures they put him in jail for. His jail also has foreign and domestic medical families and people involved with the campuses of Sandy Hook, involved with predators at the state judicial branch offices and next to it, and at the state corrections offices and next to it. In a lot of ways, they're victims / hyper victims, but you try to treat them like that, and they want to have a conversation, but they can't, incapable affording to have discern what's actually recorded. So in other words, there's a Michael Emmett that is further involved with the police chief Cintron and 1 years ago, involved also with cousins of a Phil Collo, involved too. The Phil Collo, now I saw him on my street too after the Bob Chase confessions, and I can't get him onto paper at all. I mentioned to you that there's a fake sentence in one of the falsified police reports. What they do, they put multiple falsified police reports, change the arresting officer's names, change things. They're just putting fake things. God knows what they put in databases. They've been confessing, demonstrating, recording, confirmed. They've been putting predicate acts with facts in the database roles at the databases at each of the campuses I went to. And they have collusion/S with names at each of the campuses I went to. So that was the youngest kid. There were timed collusion/S, we use/S of that. It's relative to where to how. Everyone's saying that, Trump and the general gave 22 points, they said. Rather than speak on those points, even if they're all nonsense, speak on those points. See, everyone's being for any individual, know how they could be a general or a president/chief. No, they'll change their fake what they say, hide with it, and or get away with it too, because they've been doing it at every campus we went to, putting predicate acts for facts, pretending putting fake exceptions, like little magic tricks, exceptions and demonstration of the same. Forcing people are not getting, in other words, get them on paper. So WFSB has a whole bunch of people in the Britain Superior Court, Harvard courts, and Connecticut's District Court before the World Trade Center attack. They have collusions at intercities locations and with names next to and conjunctive to the state judicial branch offices and the state corrections offices the same way, next to it and conjunctive to it. There's a Michelle Sandquist, is one of the people that were recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed that was influenced to put fake ties, fake natures of ties to me. It's because she sat next to me in a 6th grade class with people increasingly in classes before I had that, who had syntax increasingly involved with proven federal criminals after that. But they've been pretending passions and emotions with various natures of federal criminals and people from other countries, and the roles with identity rackets, with some black KKK, Confederate flag seeing people, and Latinos and Italian thing, and intra-cultural is identity theft, fraud, slanders, and cover-ups, because it's one of the things that is manifest 3 ways against everyone. Black peoples, we have the colors black and white, tactically/hyper tactically, replaced from their communications, otherwise, and or employed as censored sensibilities. Everyone rolls with the breaching method. Oh, someone's calling out black people's whites of eyes. Huh? In other words, there is hunger on a mass scale. The suburbs are designed, they can't even make, in other words, oh, here, look, we have a community garden in New York City. So the nature of debate, this preaching method showed the names of the people assigned at each age. That's the only way, some ways, the only way they had the value, having been told, in other words, blame other things, others yourselves, for where and how at every moment increasingly. How only abridged sciences have spoken, for only criminal and citizens' natures of sciences have spoken for New York City, for the suburbs, let alone for New York City, for our founding locations, about the most critical things like wars, like revolution. Now, you can't understand wars if you can't understand the revolution, you can't understand the 3 natures of America's founders as Native Americans, and then further with them in that couple, because Native Americans had to fight with Native Americans about what to do, or just to ignore it. We're in how more and more we are prohibited from appreciation of how nature communicates, and what nature communicates. Black people, I'll show fear to hide and plot. I rap a lot. Don't kick me off, please. You too. FBI is recorded involved, also with courts and prosecutors, through administrations, putting fake transcripts with people recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. A Joshua Julian is involved with them with more sexual and medical offenders at next to the campuses, including with security families of the schools. The differences of positions A through Z, those differences were also used by this breaching method that keeps people incapable of affording to have people speak about the past honestly, or they start sensing it and they just commit predicate acts for the facts. So all kinds of criminally foreign influence readings of statutes and precedents regarding what's typed online and regarding why and how people say things mean online, etc. They're lying about their motivations on a mass scale. The breaching method showed them that that's discernible, and they're showing them they need to hide that past, active now group reason, and to calm. They need to play stupid offensively. Please get me off fake conversations with WFSB, Channel 3 News, and get them at the same time with the interbranch onto paper, one name and sequence, Judge Napolitano. In other words, all these countries were involved too. And these were our names, intercities and intra-cities, inter-campuses, involved with identity, fraud, standards, predicate acts with facts and databases. We'll discern this as ones involved at the World Trade Center towers. Next to it, a bunch of people involved with O'Brien and their roles with one of the World Trade Center family's victims, and people with the name Faenza and others with the name Oliveri said that the neighbors of recorded capacity demonstrated and DeMoro have the neighbors of the victims, same victims of the family, involved with them with predicate acts with facts on off campuses in intercities and interstates and foreign, per also hyper foreign, not just group countries they're involved with. One of them looks just like an Aaron Monte, which might be a fake name. Because there was an Aaron too. I never had a word of conversation with him. There's an Aaron. One time he walked by me with Joe DeMoro, who's recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Like I caught them recorded, replacing and faking digital evidences and phone transcripts as the people involved with some Mendez police who attached me to fake conversations with themselves. And DeMoro's have roles with people named Scalora. They said it's their cousins with the Saudi attackers at intercities and intra-cities, intra-campuses, and with people with the FBI director at next to the World Trade Center attack, involved with the Claudia Scalora, involved also with the court next to it, names on all sides of that case in the court itself, involved with predicate acts with facts with a bunch of people at Central Connecticut State University, also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed by people, by students and professionals at other campuses involved with this. It's also problems on a mass scale where everyone's speaking through others. And then, in other words, that's also increasingly fake. So, in other words, and switching names into branches is involved. And these are people involved with untimely deaths and murders, etc. So, in other words, before James Madison, and even after, through James Monroe's life, he didn't have free speech. That's why, so if anyone had free speech, slavery wouldn't be entrenched. If anyone honestly appreciated why we're supposed to get the Constitution unabridged, in other words, we wouldn't have all these problems, and we wouldn't blame it. We wouldn't be stuck valuing it being and having blamed on criminal foreign influences, even when that's correct. Where how even when that's correct, the breaching method is keeping that the outcome /S. Many ways, the courts and the prisons have roles of all kinds of natures of organized crimes and all kinds of crimes. The differences of the employments at all ages and natures of campuses of the republic for which we stand. This ancient campus marxist system and needs pantheism too, to be and stay led, to see through isms, including its own, to be and stay led by that one hyper that distinct identity of hyper-simultaneous nature, that one that is why and how. It is all bodies, but distinctly. It is coming to, from, as, with, and for. The finite of every detail of everything. Its group details further distinctly, non-distinctly, sometimes slash hyper something. It is where and is how more forever nature is being made. Further positive onto itself here, or our value is forced from here, as force, space, nature transfer. Nature being its complete identity. Its complete identity of relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that equally as the Trinity, as value here, or as us, the phenomenon of beingness, force from here, as force, space, nature transfer, as Leith of Hadith, Lethe, Leith. Oh, but you have not heard it this way. Hear many pray, because abridged sciences cannot afford to have conviction, short words, by nature proper. And so by campuses that came from before its time, they became criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence. How could they have that, which appreciated sciences proper, discern? Well, they are not that. While needing to pretend other because of serious things, let alone just even peaceful nuclear generation, let alone with weapons and stuff, things like that, let alone while there's still suits and ties in suburbs that were designed for the torture, extortion, slavery method, black pupils, let alone while there's still communications, racketeering, worse than war crimes, identity theft, fraud, slavery styles, pretending other two simultaneously. Get them on paper, black pupils. Please get Judge Napolitano told. And get the my paper into branch. They already they use wire and mail crime methods. They put me fake communications. They put fake transcripts. There are proofs at the courts too. There are collusions with it anyway, even if it's not there too, but it's there too. They're putting fake things in their databases. Judge Napolitano, who disbelieves. Let's get them on paper. Let's get their name on paper in one sequence. I can only speak for myself. They put me in fake. That's also what they've been doing to other kids. I want to use this evidences that we're going to use a whole bunch of hyper-evidential things because all kinds of evidence is racketeering. Worse than war crimes is only capable of being because of the replaced communications of James Madison, of our founders. Okay, thank you. Vaccine.